It's 1995, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. A freezing winter night. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones. The kind of cold that makes every breath feel like shards of glass. And inside a tiny, dim apartment sits a 23-year-old man. 6'5", 270 pounds, built like a gladiator. But tonight he feels smaller than ever. This man is Dwayne Douglas Johnson, and he's just been cut from the Calgary Stampeders, a Canadian football team where he thought his dream would finally begin. The NFL was the dream. Miami was the proving ground. Calgary was supposed to be the stepping stone. But after weeks of barely scraping by, sleeping on a mattress he dragged in off the street, he gets the call. Pack your bags, you're done. He hangs up the phone, stares at the cracked ceiling, and whispers to himself, "What now?" He checks his pockets. $7. That's it. $7 to his name. And this isn't just about money. It's about identity. Because when you're Dwayne Johnson, child of wrestling legends, kid who everyone said was destined for greatness, what do you do when the world tells you you're not good enough? He thought about his father, Rocky Johnson, the proud wrestler who carved his way through a brutal industry. He thought about his mother, Ada, who had sacrificed everything to support him. And in that moment, he felt like he'd let them all down. In his own words, years later, he admitted, "I was broke, I was cut. I didn't know who I was anymore." It wasn't just failure, it was collapse. And as he sat there, massive frame hunch, staring at his own hands, he wondered if he'd already peaked at 23. But here's the thing. What Dwayne didn't realize in that silent, suffocating room was that this failure, this humiliation, would become the spark that forged the rock. Because just a few months later, he would step into a world he once swore he'd never enter. The squared circle. Pro wrestling. And from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. But how does a man go from broke and forgotten to becoming one of the most famous humans on Earth? To answer that, we need to go back to where it all began. To understand Dwayne Johnson's story, you can't just look at the man. You have to look at the bloodline. Dwayne wasn't born into wealth. He was born into the wild world of pro wrestling. His grandfather, Peter Maivia, was a towering figure in the Polynesian wrestling community, a man covered in tribal tattoos known as the High Chief. In the 1970s, Maivia wasn't just respected in the ring, he was revered as a cultural icon for Samoan people breaking into American entertainment. Then came Dwayne's father, Rocky Johnson, the first black man to hold the WWE Tag Team Championship alongside Tony Atlas. Rocky was fast, athletic, and charismatic, so much so that he became one of the first black wrestling stars to truly break through on a national stage. But behind the glory of flashing lights and roaring crowds, life was chaotic. The Johnson family moved constantly, following Rocky's wrestling bookings. Dwayne was born in Hayward, California in 1972, but within a few years he'd lived in New Zealand, North Carolina, Hawaii, Pennsylvania. By the time he was 14, he had already attended 13 different schools. That kind of instability leaves a mark. New town, new school, new bullies. Always being the outsider. And to make matters worse, the money wasn't steady. Professional wrestling in the 1970s and 80s wasn't a billion-dollar empire it is now. Paychecks depended on ticket sales, and if promoters didn't like you, you didn't eat. There were nights the Johnson family couldn't afford food. Nights when Dwayne watched his mother, Ada, cry in silence because they couldn't pay rent. Then came the breaking point. At 15 years old, Dwayne returned home from school one day to find his mother standing outside their small apartment with eviction papers in her hand. The landlord had changed the locks. Everything they owned was being thrown out. That memory burned itself into his brain. Later, Johnson said, "That was the day I promised myself I'd never let my family go through that again." But as a teenager, anger became his coping mechanism. By 17, he was 6'4", 225 pounds, and intimidating. He got into fights, he shoplifted, he was even arrested for theft. He was spiraling. But then something shifted. One day in high school, a football coach spotted him in the hallway. He looked at Dwayne's size and said, "Kid, ever think about playing ball?" Football became an escape. It gave him structure. It gave him an identity outside of wrestling's shadow. And for the first time, Dwayne thought maybe, just maybe, he could carve his own path. But here's the twist. That path, the one that seemed like salvation, would soon shatter, leaving him lower than ever. By the time Dwayne hit college, it looked like everything was turning around. At 18 years old, he had a body carved out of granite, a drive forged from years of instability, and a dream as big as his shoulders. He landed a spot on the University of Miami Hurricanes football team, one of the most elite programs in the country. And here's the thing, Miami in the early 1990s wasn't just any team. They were a dynasty. Swagger, dominance, national championships. It was the place to be if you wanted a shot at the NFL. In 1991, Johnson was part of the squad that won the national championship. He wore the ring with pride. But beneath the surface, reality was biting. Because while Dwayne was good, he wasn't great. Standing in his way was a young defensive tackle who would go on to NFL superstardom, Warren Sapp. And against Sapp's speed and skill, Johnson couldn't break into the starting lineup. Then came the injuries. A major back surgery, nagging pains, time on the bench. His dream of NFL glory was slipping away, one play at a time. By 1995, his college career ended not with fireworks, but with uncertainty. He wasn't drafted. The phone never rang on draft day. For most players, that's the death of the dream. But Dwayne refused to quit. So he went north, signed with the Calgary Stampeders in the Canadian Football League. At first, he thought it was a lifeline, a way to prove himself. But reality was harsher. Instead of stadiums full of screaming fans, there were half-empty bleachers. Instead of big paychecks, he was making $250 a week. He slept on a filthy mattress he'd hauled in from a dumpster. Sometimes he didn't even have enough money to eat. And then came the call. 2 months into the season, Calgary cut him. Just like that, his football career was over. No warning, no backup plan. He was 23 years old, broke, depressed, and stranded in Canada with only $7 to his name. Years later, Johnson said, "That was the worst time of my life. My whole identity was tied to being a football player. When that was gone, I didn't know who I was anymore." He flew back to Florida and sank into despair. He stayed in his tiny apartment, avoiding friends, avoiding family, avoiding the world. The same man who once dreamed of NFL glory now lay on a second-hand mattress, staring at the ceiling, wondering if his life was already over. But this is where fate intervened. His father, Rocky Johnson, a retired wrestler, came to him, and he said the words Dwayne never wanted to hear. "Why don't you try wrestling?" At first, Dwayne hated the idea. He'd seen how brutal the wrestling world was, the travel, the injuries, the poverty. He'd promised himself he would never live that life. But when you've lost everything, you start to reconsider. And so, reluctantly, Dwayne agreed. He began training with his father. He stepped into dingy gyms. He learned the holds, the bumps, the slams. And slowly, the fire came back. Not for football, but for something bigger. Because little did he know, the kid who failed at football was about to become The Rock. When Dwayne Johnson first stepped into the wrestling world, he wasn't The Rock. He was Rocky Maivia, a clean-cut, smiling babyface character built on his father's and grandfather's legacies. It should have worked. WWE was promoting him as the next big thing, the chosen one, the blue chip prospect. But fans saw through it. They booed, they jeered, they chanted, "Die, Rocky, die." Imagine that. You've just clawed your way out of failure. You're finally making it in your family's business, and tens of thousands of people are screaming for you to disappear. It crushed him. But instead of quitting, Dwayne made a decision that would change everything. He stopped pretending. He dropped the fake smiles, and he created a new persona, brash, cocky, sharp with words, The Rock. Suddenly, the boos turned to cheers. The arrogance became charisma. And by the late 1990s, The Rock was one of the biggest stars in WWE. He wasn't just a wrestler. He was a showman. His catchphrases became pop culture. "Can you smell what The Rock is cooking?" wasn't just a line, it was an anthem. Feuds with Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, and Mankind turned him into a global superstar. And while his moves in the ring made him dangerous, it was his mic skills, his ability to electrify a crowd, that made him legendary. But The Rock wasn't content with just wrestling. He had his eyes on something bigger: Hollywood. In 2001, he made his debut in The Mummy Returns. The role was small, but his screen presence was undeniable. A year later, he starred in The Scorpion King, and suddenly, Dwayne Johnson was headlining movies. At the time, he was the highest-paid, first-time leading man in Hollywood history. But here's the truth most people forget. Hollywood didn't completely accept him at first. Critics dismissed him as just a wrestler trying to act. Studios typecast him as the muscle guy. He got stuck in roles that played up his size but didn't test his talent. So, he tried something unexpected. He pivoted. He did family comedies like The Game Plan and Tooth Fairy. Fans laughed, critics mocked him, but those films did well at the box office. And more importantly, they proved something. Dwayne Johnson had range. Slowly, he built momentum. By the 2010s, he was headlining blockbuster franchises, Fast and Furious, Jumanji, Moana. In 2016, he was named the highest-paid actor in the world. The kid with $7 in his pocket was now pulling in $20 million per movie.
On screen, The Rock was untouchable, a superhero, the people's champion. Off screen, the mask was cracking. Behind the megawatt smile was a man haunted by self-doubt, haunted by depression, and surrounded by whispers that his ego was getting too big. Because when you're the most bankable star in Hollywood, expectations only grow heavier, and the cracks in his armor were about to show. To the outside world, Dwayne Johnson was unstoppable, the Hollywood success story, the wrestler who broke through, the smile that lit up every red carpet. But smiles can be masks, and The Rock's smile was hiding something darker. Because behind closed doors, Dwayne was battling a shadow that had followed him since his teens: depression. He's spoken about it openly in interviews years later. The times he would sit in his apartment, blinds drawn, not answering calls. The mornings where getting out of bed felt like lifting more weight than he'd ever carried in the gym. And it didn't just happen once. Depression hit him in waves. The first wave came after football ended. The second, when fans turned on Rocky Maivia. The third, during his Hollywood climb, when the pressure to succeed felt unbearable. He admitted, "I didn't know what depression was. I just knew I didn't want to do a thing. I didn't want to go anywhere. I was crying constantly." But here's the thing nobody saw. The bigger he got, the more roles, more money, more fame, the more isolated he became. People in his circle whispered that The Rock was impossible to say no to. that he demanded control, that his ego was different than the humble persona he projected. On Reddit threads and wrestling forums, fans debated his reputation. Was he truly the nice guy he appeared to be? Or was that just another role, The Rock, reinvented for Hollywood? Even in the Fast and Furious family, one of the biggest franchises in movie history, cracks began to show. Behind the scenes, tensions grew between Dwayne and Vin Diesel. Reports of clashes, rumors of arguments, Dwayne posting cryptic Instagram captions about candy asses on set. The smile? Still there in public, but the mask was slipping. Because the truth was, The Rock wasn't just fighting box office numbers or demanding studios. He was fighting himself. Every day. Trying to balance the man he was, the character he'd created, and the expectations of millions of fans who saw him as invincible. And here's the irony. The man who built his empire on being the strongest was quietly living with moments where he felt the weakest. But the way Dwayne responds to struggle, he doesn't retreat. He doubles down, he reinvents, he fights harder. And that fight was about to take him into something even bigger, becoming a brand, not just an actor. But success at that level doesn't just bring money and fame. It brings new controversies, new enemies, and new risks that could either make him or finally break him. By the mid-2010s, Dwayne Johnson wasn't just an actor. He was a machine. Wake up at 4 a.m., hit the Iron Paradise, his traveling gym that moves with him from set to set, train until he's dripping in sweat, then shoot, film, meetings, family, brand deals, repeat. But this wasn't just about looking the part. It was about building an empire. See, when football failed, Dwayne started with literally $7 in his pocket. So when he finally had leverage, he built something called $7 Productions. The goal? To control his own destiny, to create projects where he wasn't just the star, he was the boss. And it worked. Through $7, he produced blockbuster hits like Jumanji, Jungle Cruise, and Black Adam. He wasn't just an actor for hire anymore, he was shaping his own career. But movies were just one lane. The Rock was thinking bigger. He became a brand architect. Endorsements? He partnered with Under Armour to launch Project Rock, a line of shoes, headphones, and workout gear that sold out instantly. Tequila? He founded Terramana, which exploded into one of the fastest-growing celebrity tequila brands ever. TV? He produced shows like Ballers and even a sitcom about his own life, Young Rock. Suddenly, The Rock wasn't just appearing in films, he was everywhere. Billboards, commercials, gyms, clothing, drinks. You couldn't escape him. And the money? Astronomical. By 2020, Forbes named him the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, earning over $87 million in a single year. But here's where the story gets more complicated, because when you expand into everything, when your face is on shoes, movies, tequila, and TV, you stop being just a man. You become a machine. And machines aren't supposed to break. But whispers kept growing. That the same hunger that drove him from failure to fortune might eventually push him over the edge. Even his pet projects weren't guaranteed wins. Take Black Adam. Dwayne hyped it for years, promising it would change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe. It was supposed to be his crowning achievement. But when it finally dropped in 2022, the box office underperformed. Warner Bros. Reset the DC franchise, and suddenly the Dream Project became a very public disappointment. For the first time in years, The Rock looked vulnerable. But if there's one thing we've learned about Dwayne Johnson, It's this. Every time he hits a wall, he reinvents. Every time people count him out, he finds a new lane. And just when it seemed like maybe his empire had peaked, Dwayne started making moves that shocked everyone. Moves that weren't just about movies or merch, but about power. By now, Dwayne Johnson was untouchable in theory, but no empire, no matter how vast, is without cracks. Take charity, for example. In 2023, when Maui was devastated by wildfires, Johnson raised millions for relief efforts. The headlines called it heroic. The internet called it not enough. Fans criticized him. Why only this amount? Why announce it publicly? Is this just a PR stunt? And Johnson, who had endured decades of public scrutiny, did something rare. He responded publicly. A heartfelt statement defending his actions. A reminder that even the people's champion can't please everyone. Then there were business deals. An $11 million Army sponsorship tied to his UFL football league fell through. Media outlets speculated it damaged his reputation. Some fans even questioned, can The Rock really succeed outside Hollywood? Even WWE wasn't immune to debate. Fans and insiders speculated about a full comeback. Some cheered, some worried that his returns overshadowed younger wrestlers who had fought for years to build their own legacy. And while the world was watching, rumors started circulating. On-set tension with co-stars, tardiness on film sets, stories about him peeing in bottles during marathon shoots. Some exaggerated, some were true. All added to the narrative of Dwayne Johnson as both a genius and a difficult star. But here's the real story hidden behind the tabloids. He is relentless. He is obsessed with perfection. And he is constantly recalibrating to stay on top. Because for every empire he builds, there's a shadow to balance it. For every handshake he offers, there's scrutiny waiting. For every accolade, there's a whisper. Did he earn it? Or did he take it? And yet, despite the critiques, the controversies, the backlashes, The Rock keeps moving forward. He doesn't hide. He doesn't apologize unnecessarily. He doesn't slow down, because that's what separates legends from mortals. He's no longer just Dwayne Johnson. He's The Rock, a persona, a brand, a force. And every step he takes carries the weight of millions of expectations and millions more eyes. But the question remains, can someone balance fame, fortune, and authenticity without losing themselves? Or is the price of power always more than anyone can handle? And soon we'll see him answer that in a way no one expected. So here's the truth that most people don't see. Dwayne Johnson has fallen harder than most of us will ever know. He's been cut from football. He's been booed in wrestling. He's been criticized in Hollywood. He's been doubted, questioned, and scrutinized his entire life. He's faced depression, setbacks, failures, moments when the man we know as The Rock might have wanted to disappear. And yet, every single time, he climbed back. Every failure became fuel. Every insult became motivation. Every obstacle became a stepping stone to the empire he built today. From $7 in his pocket to a global brand. From wrestling rings to Hollywood screens, from a depressed, lost kid to the most recognizable human on Earth. Dwayne Johnson's story isn't just about fame or fortune. It's about resilience. It's about reinvention. It's about finding power in your lowest moments. But here's the lingering question. After decades of triumphs, of building, of winning, of dominating, what comes next? Does The Rock continue to chase bigger roles, bigger deals, bigger numbers? Or does he finally seek something more personal, more human, more meaningful? Because for all the accolades, for all the adoration, For all the muscles and million-dollar movie deals, the ultimate victory might not be on a screen or a paycheck. It might just be peace. And that's what makes Dwayne Johnson's story so compelling. It's not about perfection. It's about the climb, the struggle, the reinvention. So the next time you feel beaten down, forgotten, or at your lowest, remember this. The kid with $7 in his pocket, who almost quit before he started, became a legend. And if he can rise from nothing, what could you do if you refuse to give up? Because the Rock story isn't over yet, and the next chapter might just surprise us all.